All right. Oh, we've got some more coming in. So we've got some stragglers, they're coming in. So we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, students. Thanks for joining us today for our 3-in-1 workshop. This is kind of one of a two-part, but you're not required to attend the second one, but they kind of they work together, and they'll both be presented by Ms. Beverly Mincer, who is a great EfTA volunteer. If you were part of our nonprofit panel a couple weeks ago, her daughter Rebecca was on that and is a former EfTA student. And so we are excited to have her back to talk with you guys. Again, this is going to be a small group, so we can hopefully see you guys as you turn your cameras on. There will be opportunities to ask questions throughout. Since we are small, I should be able to see all of you on my screen whenever we go to shared screen mode. So you can feel free to wave your hand, unmute, use the chat, and if you have questions, come up and we'll make sure to get those answered. I will be recording this, so it will be added onto our YouTube page for future reference for you guys. So I think we're ready to get started. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Ms. Beverly Mincer, who again is an EfTA volunteer, a great supporter of ours. You were part of our energy panel last year, where we had a handful of ExxonMobil retirees with us, and we've had a couple of them back throughout various panels. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Mincer, and she will get us started for today.
Okay, well, thank you. Nice to meet y'all, and good to see Aiden, Samantha, Max there, Rossi, Tess, and Jose. If y'all can let me see your faces, that makes it more fun for me, and I really appreciate that. So what I'm going to talk about today is an approach that I've learned because I work as a career counselor at Purdue University. And I see a lot of students struggle with all the different steps of the job search process up there. And after watching that, I thought, man, there's a better way to do this in a way that you can continue to carry forward with you, as you go through life in your career. So let me share my screen here. All right. Okay, so what we call this is 3-in-1, and everybody likes to be efficient and effective and get the job done without spending too much time. So this is a way to integrate and still have a high impact approach to marketing your skills via resumes, cover letters, and interviews. And you see my background there. I will tell you, I just gave this talk last week to college undergraduate students from across the country who were in a summer program at Purdue University. And I did not change a thing for y'all. So this is, certainly valuable for you now and as you go forward through college. So why is this helpful? And what I've seen in students is this typical 3-step approach. The career fairs come in September, October, and everybody gets their resume together and, ready for the career fair. And then the recruiter says, apply online. And then you go online, it says you need a cover letter. And you're like, oh man, now I got to write a letter. And then if you're successful, they'll call you and you may have an interview in a pretty short time frame. And you're thinking, oh man, now I got to get ready for my interview. So it's kind of like running hurdles, every time you have to get up and go again, get up and go again. So this will give you a way to prepare for all 3 at one time. And you do that with these steps. You brainstorm first your best skills and stories, then you link them together. And you do that while using 2 things I'm going to explain to you, a forward-facing approach and what they call in the professional career counselors, T-shaped professionals concept. So just like the construction folks on the right, it's all about beginning with the end in mind and planning ahead. So first, the forward-facing approach. What's different about that? Well, I see a lot of resumes where people list all the awards they've gotten. But the problem with that is it's nice to know you got an award, but we have no idea what you did to earn that award. And that's the part that's really exciting. So you want everything you put on your resume to be relevant to the future of the skills that the job you're applying for is going to help you versus just a historical summary. I know I saw one resume and they had on there that I can operate a forklift, but they were not applying for a job where that was a valued skill. So use that line for something else. So you always want to think about what you can do versus what you have done and pick the skills and the way you say it to focus forward. And then, particularly as you grow in your career, you'll have more and more experiences. And some people try to cram it all on one page, which is not good at all. So what you want to have on there, your very best skills versus all your experiences. And remember that it's about you versus about your work. Sometimes people will put on a resume, they'll almost describe the mission of like a nonprofit organization they work for versus what they personally did. And then you need to prove it. How do you prove to someone on a piece of paper that you have those skills versus just telling them? And you do it with examples by telling them really good examples of where you've applied those skills. That adds the credibility that you need going forward. So here's the T-shaped professionals. When you think about your skills, you'll find that you have two types of skills. Across the top of a T are your broad skills: teamwork, communications, analytical abilities, creativity, leadership, very important. And then your deep skills may be, I'm super at Microsoft Excel or other specialty software. Maybe you've worked in a lab or you have certifications, safety certification. Think of a lifeguard, all the training they have. And so you need to look at those two sets of skills differently as you're thinking about how you apply for jobs. So let me give you a couple examples from students who I have worked with. So one fella had worked in a restaurant. And the first version of resume he brought me said he managed inventory for food, drinks, and frozen goods. But he was a chemical engineer and he was applying for a chemical engineering job. Well, you're not going to manage frozen goods in a chemical engineering job. But that same experience, he's changed it to be a broad skill. Managed inventory by providing expectations and oversight of timely delivery with suppliers. He is going to do that a whole lot in his career. So see how you can take a deep skill and convert it to a broad skill. Another fun example, this is a fellow from Louisiana. On his resume, he said he had assisted in corralling cattle to be sold, medicated, or branded. Now, he was majoring in petroleum engineering, and he wasn't going to brand any cattle in that job. So we talked about it, and he switched it to assessing the potential risks that could be faced during cattle roundup to ensure the safety of ourselves and the livestock. So he brought in two great skills there: risk assessment and safety, both of which are super important in his future career. So now let's move forward to kind of a stepwise process on thinking about your best skills and best stories. And I'd like your input on some of this. So Corinne, if you can watch the chat room, or you guys really just speak up. So if you think about your best skills and stories, think of an analogy of a cell phone. Would you go buy a cell phone that only did one thing? Not today, that's for sure. So you want to be the cell phone for that employer that has lots of apps, lots of skills and abilities. So you focus on broad skills when you're applying for a different job, and deep skills, like if you've worked in a lab and you're applying for a lab job, you keep those on there. And both non-technical and technical are really essential because every job involves working with people. And that's where your non-technical skills are really important. So I've got on the left there a microscope and some binoculars, just as symbols of tools that might be used in jobs. So think about, and someone offer up your thoughts here on, let's start with, let's use the microscope. I think that one's a little easier. So give me some examples of what a deep skill would be for a microscope. So you can just speak up or put it in the chat, whatever you prefer.
I have one. It could be a blood test laboratory, maybe. So they see the blood and they test
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, laboratory, like a microbiologist or biomedical engineering or research. Thank you, Rosie. So now think about, so if you were applying for a job and you'd worked with a microscope, what are some broad skills you could say that were involved? Oh, I see we have video editor. Yeah. So what are some broad skills that might be involved in using the microscope that would be transferable to a different type of job?
Ability to work in a group, like with your lab partners.
Absolutely, Samantha, that's great.
Maybe like the ability to analyze information and
Excellent. Yeah, analyzing information. Yeah, you're looking in there and then you have to make sense of it. Attention to detail is another one that comes to mind for me. So see how you take the same situation and then you can spin it as a deep skill or a broad skill. So when you brainstorm your best skills, think about, like, what are the top 10 things you want a recruiter to know that you can do? And literally just list those down. It'll be a mixture of everything, but just kind of let the brainstorm process work. Don't analyze it too much. Just drop it down. So then you want to brainstorm the best stories you want to tell a recruiter. And these are the stories that prove you have those skills. So let's think about baseball. Probably some of y'all have played sports. So you say, okay, I've got all this experience in sports. So what stories would I want to tell a recruiter? Well, you could talk about, gosh, you've got a lot of self-discipline and commitment for all the practices. Maybe it's performing under pressure. Maybe it's leadership, teamwork, making split-second decisions. So again, just brainstorm these stories. Now, you don't want all of your stories to come from like one experience. So you don't want to bore a recruiter and like every time they ask a question, you say, well, you know, when I was in Key Club or when I was on the volleyball team. You want to mix it up to keep it interesting. And who among y'all watch TED Talks or are familiar with TED Talks? I see a few hands there. Oops, I gotta bring my screen back. So raise your hands again if you like TED Talks. Okay. So think of these stories you're going to tell a recruiter as having that excitement and that passion that you see in TED Talks. So tell me some things. What makes TED Talks great? What do y'all see in those talks that impresses you?
I say like the preparation. They
Yeah.
know exactly what they're gonna say, and
Excellent, Mac. Yeah, they're well prepared.
I like how excited they are about their topics.
Yeah, the enthusiasm. Anything else? Okay. So think about those. And if you have a favorite one that comes to mind, kind of make that kind of your vision of like what you would be like when you're in a job interview. So there's a neat book called Talk Like TED, where they analyzed all these TED Talks and said, what makes TED Talks great? And there were three key things here: to be emotional, to be novel, and to be memorable. So let's break those down a little bit. So emotional is sharing a passion and making that person-to-person connection. And you talked about the practice, Mac. It's interesting that to come across as natural as they do takes a lot of practice. It's almost counterintuitive. You think, well, if I don't practice, I'll be really natural. But to be as impressive and natural at the same time takes a lot of practice. So you really have to put your heart into this too, not just your words, obviously. And then novel, you want to tell something new and interesting. And one thing is novel about everybody is your personality. You want to let your personality show. Some people feel like they have to be like some stiff robot, in a job interview. And that's not true, because you're talking person to person and you want to make that person to person connection. And a lot of that is about kind of being yourself and letting your personality show. And then you want them to remember what you've said. One way, in TED Talks always do this, is tell a story. If you think about it, and the next one you watch, think about how much storytelling they're doing. They don't just say the key things that are important are ABC. They got a story about A, they got a story about B, they got a story about C. And I like the way the book said, they called it data with a soul. But when you tell that story, that recruiter is going along with you and they're kind of living that experience with you as you describe it. So if it's tense, if it's a difficult problem to solve, that comes through. And when you're doing that example, you're painting a mental picture so that they can see it. I've seen and listened to too many interviews where people will say something like, well, we got a team together and we had a problem to solve, and after a month, we divided up the work, we got it all done, and it all turned out well. You have no idea what problem they solved. You have no idea how big the team was. It's just boring. But then in interviews, you also need to be concise and easy to understand, just like TED Talks are very concise. They're very strict on the time limits. One student, one time I asked him, I said, what was the most challenging problem you ever solved in your internship? And he had worked at a sugar plant. And he started telling me how they make sugar. And it went on so long, I thought he had forgotten the question. But you've got to zoom right in on what they want you to talk about. And, so their mind doesn't wander and go right to the subject. And y'all feel free to interrupt anytime if you have a question about this. So back to your best skills, best stories. So let's say right now you've got two lists. One has your skills, one has your stories that show the very best you are. Well, now you need to link them together. And just like if you're buying a gift for a very special person, you put some thought into that, what they like, what's important. And when you package it together, the person and the gift, it's really a great combination. So that's what you want to do here. So one story per skill. So you got your leadership story, you got your analyzing data story, you've got your adaptability story, you've got your creativity story. And like I said earlier, choose different situations so these aren't repetitive. So then when you're in an interview and they ask you a question, tell me about a time when you led a team to accomplish a goal. You're like, boom, I got it right there. You're not like staring at the ceiling trying to think of what to say while you're talking. And that's quite impressive to a recruiter when you can just go straight to the answer. Another sign of good preparation. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through an example of how this works. So let's say, we'll start with the brainstorming, but then we'll show you how it comes together for your interview, for a cover letter, and for a resume. So I stole my son's Boy Scout Eagle project to use as the example. Although that's not my son, it was just a good Boy Scout picture. Anyway, so he has this complex project and he could use it for many stories: leadership, project management, public speaking. And my son's a mechanical engineer, and project management is a pretty strong engineering skill. So let's pick that one. So he says, I'm going to use this story to demonstrate my project management skills. So when you do the 3-in-1, you're going to start with your interview answer, because that's the longest story you're going to give, or longest explanation of your story. Then you'll do your cover letter and write 1 or 2 sentences about project management skills, and your resume, just 1 little bullet. And then the back, always be thinking about obvious questions you may get too. Are y'all familiar with the STAR technique? Does that ring a bell with anybody for interviewing? No? Who's had a job interview before? Raise your hand. Okay, 1, great. So there'll be some new territory here. All right, well, the STAR technique is the acronym for situation, task, action, result. And you need to give this answer in under 2 minutes. So when they say, tell me about a time when, you say, well, I was at an internship doing whatever, we were asked to do X, Y, Z, and then focus most of the answer on what you did. And then be sure to say the result, because what does business want you to do? Deliver results. So I'll walk you through this example with this Eagle Scout project. So I would start saying, well, the situation was that I had to upgrade a 4,000 book church library, and I got to uncover my words, with a team of volunteers for my Eagle Scout project. Well, I had 3 important tasks. We had to identify organized books worth keeping. We had to develop a sustainable tracking system for them to keep up with the books. And then we had to dispose of the unwanted books. So first I had to get approval for my project, both from the church and the Boy Scout leadership. Then I worked with a librarian to define what are the upgrade criteria. How do you decide what books are worth keeping and what books aren't? Then we worked to design a computer database, and I recruited 5 volunteers to work with me and organize the work processes over a 3-month period. Then I finally had to report out the results. The results were that we sorted all the books, donated 50% of them, reorganized the remaining books, created the database. I had to give a presentation to the church membership one Sunday and earn the Eagle Scout rank. So there's a lot there, and see how it goes pretty quickly and concisely when you use the STAR technique. So next is the cover letter. Has anyone written a cover letter? I doubt. Oh, good, Samantha. What was yours for?
I had an assignment freshman year where we were doing a bunch of group work and we had to interview, write a cover letter, and write a resume to apply for group leader.
Wow, I am so glad they are doing that for you guys. I make meet college students who have never written a cover letter and are trying really hard to avoid writing them too. So, well, I'll be curious what you think about this. So again, now you've got your skill story combo. So what you want to do is you want to write 2 sentences about that story. And in a cover letter in general, you always customize the content to focus on the skills that match the job requirements. So if you've applied for this job and you read it in the company website as they are all proud of innovation and they want you to be an innovative problem solver, you ought to have a couple sentences on innovation in your cover letter. So you pick the ones that are important to them, that come from your experiences, versus this is not the same cover letter for everybody. And again, make your story come alive. And remember, they already have your resume. So you don't want to repeat your resume, you want to enhance your resume. And you don't want to list skills and activities, because a list that just says, I'm an excellent leader and communicator and I can deliver business results. Prove it. Now, what I see at the university level is that a lot of times on job applications, this is optional and they go, oh, good, I don't have to do it. But if an employer gives you an opportunity to submit another page about yourself, people who really want that job will always do it. So if you are kind of applying for 20 jobs that week and, you're going as fast as you can, the people who take the time to submit that cover letter will get much more attention from those evaluating the application. So back to our example here. So here's 2 sentences. I demonstrated my project management skills by planning and executing the upgrade of a church library with over 4,000 books. After getting approval from the church and defining the upgrade criteria with a librarian, I organized a team of volunteers to sort, categorize, reshelf, and dispose of books. So what you've done now, you've got your project management skill and you got your project management sentences, and you can kind of put them to the side. So then when you're writing, if you have to write a lot of cover letters, you go over there and you just pick those 2 sentences up and put them in your letter. And you've got other sentences already written on other skills, and you pick the skills the employer wants and you put them in the letter. So it's not that blank page syndrome where you're like, oh shoot, now I got to write a cover letter. What am I going to say? So after you've written these, they're just there ready to go. So for a resume, I strongly recommend what Purdue University suggests in their Career Center is using this 3-part bullet point formula. And the 3 parts, and I'll talk more about this on Thursday when we do a deep dive in resumes, but you always start with a power verb, which is your skill. Designed, analyzed, led, communicated, troubleshoot, shot something, modeled, simulated, programmed. And then the task, briefly, so you give them context, and then something interesting about it. So the purpose, method, or result. Anytime you can put in a result, that's always great. Anytime you can quantify something, that's good too. And well, the resume is your first impression. So it's really, really important here. So continuing our example. So what might go on your resume is managed a 3-month upgrade project for a 4,000 book church library with volunteers. So project management, we got both those words in that one little bullet. And you want to make it interesting enough that they ask you about it in the interview, because this is one of your best stories. Some people put bullets on their resume that when I ask them about, they said, oh, well, I really didn't do that much. Well, take that baby off. Because if they ask you and you spend time in a 25-minute interview telling them that that wasn't really important, you missed an opportunity to impress them with something about yourself that really is important. So wrapping up, and this is a little bit of an odd chart, but you want to, win the job in this, job search process. And I think some people think of it like a race, like that picture there, but it's very much not like a race. And let me tell you why. One, you don't know where the finish line is. You don't really know what's in that employer's mind of what they're looking for. And two, you don't know who your competition is. So you don't know if you've, met all their needs, if you're only halfway there. You don't know if there's someone, that you're tightly competing with, kind of hot on your heels for that job that they're really trying to decide, candidate A, candidate B, or is there a big pool of folks and you're the clear leader? So because it's not a transparent process, where you can't say, boy, last time I ran the 200 meter, I got this time and I know I need to cut, a second off to, win the race versus coming third or whatever. You've just got to really put yourself out there and be the best you can be, in all dimensions. So this summarizes everything. So to increase your competitiveness, to get the job you want while spending less time, brainstorm your best skills and your best stories, link each story, try to come up with about 10 pairs, then write down your star outline, your 2 sentences for your cover letter, and your 1 bullet. And then as you go through the job search process and you move from resume to cover letter to interview, you've already got all your best thinking ready to go for what you want to say. For bonus, think about obvious questions and answers. In an interview, if you're answering a question in less than 2 minutes, you're not going to tell them everything. And you want them to ask you another question because they might want to dive deeper into that particular story, or they may want to ask you about a whole different skill. So be prepared, for what the obvious questions are, and then practice, like we talked about TED Talks. Practice with your friends. There's also a neat program called Big Interview that you can go online, and it has tons of stuff about interviews, every possible kind, phone interviews, group interviews, video interviews, but they have questions and you can record yourself. There'll be someone come on, it's not live, but they'll ask you questions and you'll answer it, it'll be recorded, and then you could ask someone else to go back and evaluate, how are you doing? I know one student told me he never realized how boring he was until he watched himself on Big Interview and then really changed his technique and let more of his personality come through. So, and like I said at the beginning, this really is a lifelong skill because what happens, so now you have your high school experiences, then you're going to have your college experiences, then you're going to have your work experiences. And as you get more and more experiences, how do I decide what I put on that resume? And so you can keep using this technique as you go along. So that's all I have. And I will offer, there's my contact information. If y'all have any personal questions you want to ask me one-on-one, even later on when you're in college, feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to help. So, all right. Any questions you guys have?
Any questions?
So For those of y'all that have done an interview, either for a real job or like a school assignment, how did it go? What did you think about it?
My first interview was like 2 summers ago, and I didn't really know anything about interviewing, so I kind of went into it with like, not really sure what, how I'm supposed to answer questions and no method or anything like that. So I kind of just, didn't really know what I was doing, but it still went well. I think I got the job. I didn't end up taking
Great.
it, and then I did another interview, and then in between those two interviews, I kind of took an interviewing class, and then I did a lot better the second time.
Excellent. What did you do different, Mac? What was like one or two of the key things?
I don't really. It was a while. It was like 2 summers ago. I remember one
Yeah.
difference was at the end. I asked a couple questions, just like I think I asked like, what's like the environment, of this job, and how do people treat each other? What's the culture? Something like that. And then I think, ooh, I don't really remember what other differences I made, but I'm sure in some of the questions that I was asked that are similar, um, I kind of worded it different or gave a different answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
What about you, Samantha? You gave us the
Uh, does anything really go well as a freshman? I think that's the real question here. Um, I did not end up being one of the group leads, so yeah, not fantastic. It didn't feel like I did that poorly though. I think I may have just been outclassed by
okay.
some of my friends.
Did you take the preparation approach or just being spontaneous?
Well, I definitely did not come up with answers beforehand. I almost never do. Um, so I might work on that, I guess. And then, I mean, I did have stories like that matched up with my cover letter and my resume and stuff, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, well, one thing as you move on, by the time you graduate college, really, there's like nothing left on your resume from high school. So there might be a few things like Eagle Scout or, Gold Award for Girl Scouts and things that are pretty long lasting, but they want to see you keep growing and improving. So if you're a great leader in high school, you should be a great leader in college too, continue to build on those skills.
I feel like even as I get older, interviews are still nerve-wracking. Like there's still that element of what am I going to say? Am I going to remember the story correctly? But I think that's also a good thing because it pushes you to want to practice and do better every time. Hopefully you're not doing a ton of interviews, but when you first start out.
Right. I remember one student, I was doing a mock interview with him, and he had his resume in front of him, and you could tell he was a little nervous, and he kept looking down, looking down. And I just snatched it away. And I said, "Look at me." And all of a sudden, he just like, he was so much better, as opposed to trying to, make sure he was covering every little point, so that naturalness needs to come through too. You might miss a point here or there, but still, it's important to connect with the person in the interview.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Is everybody registered for the Thursday session for resume and getting into what those are? Do you guys still in your junior English class write a resume? Is that still something Conroe ISD does? No? Okay. Something they did back when I went to school in Conroe, but so if you haven't, and I know you guys submitted a resume through our program and there were some great, I don't remember yours specifically, but there were some great ones and there were some that like, I think we had a 3-page resume. And I don't think as a high school student, you should have a 3-page resume. So it might be if you guys have Not that you guys are those, I honestly don't remember, but it just could be a good option for you guys to sign up for that one on Thursday. We're back here at 9.
Yeah, excellent point, Corinne. Even a college graduate should just have 1 page. Maybe if you have your master's or PhD, 2 pages. You've worked 10 years, 2 pages. It shows how you prioritize and organize your written communications.
Mhm. All right, well, students, if you guys don't have any other questions, can you help me thank Ms. Spencer for joining us this morning and sharing her knowledge with you guys and allowing us to record it to be able to share it with the rest of the group. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very glad to get to talk to y'all. Hope to
Thank
see
you.
some of y'all again on Thursday.
Yes, and I will share her contact information with you guys if you didn't grab it on the screen. So I'll make sure that you guys that attend have that later today if any other questions do come up.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.